profit for new topic of discussion that we are going to continue. But first, before we're really going to start, and we're going to talk about financial architecture and modeling, we're going to continue our discussion from what we have started on earlier in the month during our executive roundtable. So if you are able to see the roundtable, welcome back. If you have not seen it yet, you definitely have a recording option to watch as a replay, and we will leave the link in comments below. But let me start first with the question that really, I think every growing fashion brand really needs to think about, and answer to yourself, right? If your revenue doubled over the next 12 months, would your profit become more predictable, or would it be business become more harder to control? Love to hear your thoughts. Leave your comments below. We do get to see your conversations, be able to respond to them. As we're moving forward, if you have some ideas you want to share or do shout outs, we'd love to, you guys. We are broadcasting this live across multiple channels, and we'd love to continue this conversation with you and continuously bring you value that we are going to discuss today. We also have a guest speaker today, Mary Stanny. I'm going to introduce her in just a few minutes as well. I'm really excited to have her on. She's my partner as well as a long-term friend, industry friend. She's been really wonderful to help us and our clients to kind of help to get financial clarity, as well as understand what would be the right things to work on during the growth, and how do we set you up for success. Mary, why don't we start off with getting you introduced a little bit? Tell us a little bit about your experience, and you've had a wonderful career at Follett. So I'd love to hear about that as well, so our listeners gets to meet you.
Well, thank you, Ye. And thank you for having me. Basically, I have over 30 years experience. My role is really to strengthen businesses in both their accounting and financial aspect of what they're doing with their companies. I drive process improvements. I led large teams at Follett. And I totally understand the challenges that companies face, especially when you're first starting or even a seasoned business. I want to help you streamline your reporting, improve your internal controls, just overall hoping that your supporting systems transition well as you go from a small, medium to a larger size company. And I bring both technical expertise and hands-on experience to deliver practical results. And again, my name is Mary Stanny, and thanks, Ye, for having me today.
Absolutely. We're really happy to have you. And, as I started on earlier, one of the things I wanted to ask is when we think about as your business is growing, and if you are growing within those 12 months, does your business really become more predictable, or would it really become a business that becomes much more harder to control? Because this is where the real test of whatever the fashion business or any product-based business in that matter is ready to scale. A lot of brands can grow revenue. A lot of brands can create demand. A lot of brands can launch products customers that really want. But only a much smaller group of brands can convert that growth into predictable profit, health, cash flow, and better decision making season after season. And that is what we're going to talk about today. In our earlier roundtable this month, we diagnosed the problem, talked about why revenue, margins, profits are not telling the same story. We talked about initial product markups. We talked about gross margins. We talked about contribution margins and true COGS. We've discussed channel economics, returns, discounts, chargebacks, and the way growth can hide structural weaknesses. But today, it's not a repeat of that conversation. Today, it's the next step. If the roundtable helped you to really see where the profit is leaking, This session is about how to build the system that prevents those leaks from becoming normal. Because once leadership team says, we understand the numbers, the next question is not, can we pull another report? How many times have you guys yourself caught yourself in the relentlessly creating report after report after report, but yet the vision is still not 100% clear, or it was already too late by the time we looked at those reports? And the next question is really, how do we redesign the way decisions are made so that the business produces better financial outcomes before the season already is over? We often trying to chase that information, but we looking at that already by the time we're looking at our reports of sales and of how it actually performed, it's too late. That's what financial architecture is all about. It's not a bookkeeping, it's not an accounting, it's not a monthly report package. It is the operating structure that connects your product decisions, channel decisions, pricing decisions, inventory decisions, sourcing decisions, and supply chain to the financial results you expect the business to produce. And when that structure is missing, the company does not just lose visibility, it loses control. You start making decisions that look reasonably in isolation, a deeper buy because demands looked stronger, or your promotionals are much more heavily involved because the inventory is too heavy and you're trying to move that inventory with all the extra promotions, or a wholesale order became really a volume where it becomes feels attractive because of that value volume, but it might necessarily be as profitable for your business, or a marketplace launch because you really thought that the growth feels there and it feels becomes available and it's another opportunity, but it's not necessarily is right for your business always. And the new SKUs we often adopt is because the customer might want the choice, but without a financial architecture underneath those decisions, every one of those moves can quietly change the economics of your business. So today we're going to move from awareness into execution. We're going to look at how to build the practical unit economic model, how to evaluate the contribution margin by channel, how to stress test profit before decisions are locked, and how to use financial modeling as a leadership decision system, not as a financial exercise that sits on a spreadsheet after the fact. But for those who are joining Path to Profit for the first time, I'd love to introduce myself. My name is Evgenia Alexandrovna Yushkova, or simply Yay, and I'm a fashion and a retail business strategist, an operating architect. And my work is very specific. My team and I help fashion, product based, and retail brands and to redesign the economic and operational systems behind the product. We're not so much focusing on marketing or branding or a surface level optimization. We do have partners for that. And of course, we support our clients when need to. But our job and our goal is to go into a foundation of the business. We look at the merchandising architecture, assortment economics, pricing structure, sourcing strategy, supply chain design, inventory flow, and internal decision frameworks. And we connect those pieces into systems that can actually produce profitable growth. The reason why this is matters the most is because most brands do not fail because nobody wants the product. Many of those brands we work with have the demand, they have the revenue, they have the customers, they have the momentum. The issue is where the system behind the product was never designed to support the levels of complexity the business has reached. And as you grow, the more complex your business becomes. And once you are operating across multiple SKUs, multiple suppliers, multiple channels, multiple price points, multiple inventory commitments, you have large teams that are already starting to potentially isolate and work on their own little islands before they actually come together. This is where the architecture and the financial architecture means the most. And this is what's important. So, Mary, before we really tackle and we start our conversation today of really how to build these financial models, I'd love to really ask you if you don't mind sharing a brief perspective from the financial and operational seat. When a brand is growing and still feeling pressure on the profit or cash, what do you usually want the leadership to understand first?
Well, the first thing when leadership starts looking at their numbers and they see that they're growing, all of a sudden they feel, yay, everything's great. Everything is wonderful. But they're not looking behind the scenes, behind those numbers. They're just looking at the growth as opposed to looking at the big picture. So it's extremely important that we structure everything so that you look at the entire thing. You need to say, how's my cash flow? How are my returns? What's my inventory like? Um, how what are my inventory turns? If I didn't say that, that's a big one. Um, you just need to make sure that you're not looking at just the one number, that you're looking at something that is going to help you forward think. How could you take those numbers and make them more predictable so that you could it's all about forecasting the future. You could look back. The idea of the numbers is a guideline. It's not the end all. You take those numbers and you have to use those numbers so that you have great forecasts within your merchandise.
Exactly. And that is why this conversation has to move beyond reporting. It has to move into how the business is actually designed to make those decisions. So before we get
Yes.
tackled, I really want you to hold on, and to everyone, this is really to all of you guys who are listening to us live, and thank you for your continuous support, but who's also continuously rewatching our replays and giving us your feedback and questions. I really want you to hold one question in your mind throughout the session. Where in your business you still making growth decisions with incomplete profit visibility? It is really where you're thinking potentially maybe it's on the SKU level, or maybe it's at the channel level. Maybe you guys are expanding the channels, but you are not really fully or not done all your scenarios of profitability, right? Maybe you're buying another layer of inventory, or maybe it's the pricing levels that you might want to look at. Supply chain levels is another big one where we often see this critical pain points, or on the promotional side, because that is the exact place where the financial architecture needs to become stronger. Let us start by making decisions that sound small but changes everything. Financial reporting tells what happens. Financial architecture helps you to design what should happen next. That is the two main big differences that we have to understand when we're talking about financial architecture versus what we're often confused with is the financial reporting. And most growing brands overlay too much on the reporting side. They look at the monthly revenue, they look at the gross margins, they look at the inventory, they look at the sales by channels, they look at the P&L after the period closes. And that information is extremely useful, but it's already too late for us to then make the decisions or understand whether this was a right move in the first place. So by the time reporting tells you margins was weaker than expected, the product was already bought. The pricing was already set. The promotion was already happened. The channels already absorbed the inventory. The customers already returned the product potentially, and the cash already moved. So the problem is not that the leaders lack data or the teams lack data. The problem is that the data is not always connected to the decisions early enough. Financial architecture moves the visibility up the stream. Instead of asking what happened to the margin last month, it asks what margin behaviors are we designing into this product before we even going to buy. Instead of asking why was the cash tight this quarter, We often prompt our clients to ask what inventory and channel decisions are likely to trap that cash before we commit the capital. Instead of asking why did the SKU underperform, we recommend to start looking at ahead of time at what job was the SKU supposed to do and did the economics supported that job. That shift is a difference between measuring the business versus steering the business forward. This is why I do not believe that financial modeling should live only in the finance department. Finance can build the model, finance can validate the assumptions, finance can help to interpret the output. But the inputs are coming from whole business. Merchandising decides the assortments. Product development shapes the cost. Sourcing affects flexibility. Supply chain affects timing and cash. Marketing affects execution cost. Operations affects fulfillment and return handling. And sales affects channel mix. So it is critically important that we structure the financial architectural modeling around and embedding that into the culture of all of those departments. This is where the critical piece comes in, and that's what we want to focus on today. Mary, from the financial and operational side, you've sat so much at your, and the role it followed. What really changes when the company stops using financials only as a reporting and starts using them as the decision systems? I've witnessed myself, even when we were working with Follett as well. We've witnessed that transition when we went from really embedding that even into private label team, this financial modeling, to start to scenario planning and really anticipating before we came and start looking at the numbers with the financial department. So tell us a little bit from your perspective about that shift.
Thanks, Jay. Um, Honestly, um, when I talk to folks about accounting and finance and projections, etc., I always have to remind them a financial statement is facts. It's already done. It's the end. It's the results. What you use those for is the future. So if when it goes from facts to future to predictions, and what merchandisers need to do is use the facts to make smart decisions as opposed to, oh, you know what? I know this. I know that T-shirt's going to sell because I love that T-shirt. It gets more emotional. It takes the emotions out of it because you're depending on the previous facts, and you're saying I'm making this decision based on what I know. Now, if that decision ends up not being 100% accurate, at least we have data point every month, or every time you're looking at the financials, you're going back and saying what data points weren't accurate that made me make those decisions. So it's a constant analytic, but you need to keep it. You can't wait till the end of the month. You need to be having these discussions throughout the month, and you need to include the teams that know, like you said, the planners, the whoever's designing it, whoever's ordering it, your supply chain, it takes a whole team. It takes a whole group of people to make decisions, and looking at the financials, interpreting them, and deciding based on facts what decisions I need to make.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so thank you, Mary, for your wonderful and valuable insight. And so let us get practical and build the foundation of that decision system today. We're going to start with one product category, not where the whole company really is, right? Because the fastest way to make financial architecture useful is to make it very specific before you start to scale out. A strong unit of economic models does not begin with every product in the business. It begins with one category, with one product family, or one SKU group where the company needs better visibility. I really challenge you guys to think about right now as we're discussing this. What might that be in your business? Where would you might want to actually turn the table and look at your economics model and build economics model around a particular maybe category, a particular product? That is important because many teams try to solve financial visibility at the enterprise first. They want the perfect dashboards, the perfect P&Ls, the perfect reporting structure. Now with AI, we're all getting very excited of how to create easy way to pull those reports and start analyzing those reports. And it's all, we have the tools to do it. But the problem is with the approach is that the often becomes too abstract. And not all the teams are able to read those reports or analyze those reports on those granular levels that we actually expect them to. Profit is created in the specific decisions. So the model has to get closer enough to those decisions to actually change the behavior. For a fashion brand, that usually means we build at the product category level first. Let's really say we choose denim category, a dress category, or an outerwear footwear, right? Or maybe you're looking at your hero category. The question is really not as simple. What is the margin? The question really needs to be, what does it actually cost this business to sell this category through this channel under these realistic conditions? A working model needs to move through the layers. Layer one is revenue per unit. That is your selling price, adjusted to expected discounting or markdown behavior. Layer two is where a true product costs, right? Not just FOB, not just where the factory, charged you, or potentially you also factored in some freight, but it's a true cost, including your landed cost, duty, freight, packaging, testing, compliance, and any costs required to get the product into the sellable condition. Layer three is the channel specific costs. Whether you're doing D2C, wholesale, marketplace, retail partners, or international distribution, they all do not behave the same way. Each channel has a different cost, different timing risk, and a cash behavior. Layer four is return impact. Returns are not just a deduction, they change margin. They are become operational workload. Inventory visibility is another big one that it impacts, and forecasting accuracy, and of course, the cash timing. And layer five is the fulfillment and operational cost. Pick and pack, shipping, reverse logistics, customer service, payment fees, platform fees, chargebacks, routing compliances, marketplace commissions, and handling costs all matter. And we have to take them into account when we're starting to make those decisions. And layer six is the overhead logic. This does not mean overloading every SKU with a false percentage allocation. But what it does mean is the leadership needs to have a way to understand whether the product contribution really is enough to support the broader business overall. When those layers are visible, the conversation changes immediately. The question stops being, did this product sell? It becomes, did this product create the kind of profit, cash, and strategic value we expected to create? Most brands think they already have a unit economics model because they know that their retail price, costs, and gross margins. But that is not a unit economics model. That is just simplified margin review, right? A simplified margin view can tell you whether the original buy assumptions look attractive. It cannot tell you whether the product remains profitable after the business actually has to sell, fulfill, support, return, discount, and replenish it. This is why the product can look strong on paper and still be weak for the contribution margin. It could have strong initial markup, healthy gross margin, good demand, strong sell through, and then returns and discounts and freight and fulfillment and operational costs quietly absorb the profit. How many times have you guys personally experienced this? We have lots of clients who come specifically with those problems because they do not have the visibility to it, or they do not granularly, deeply looking to understand those economics. That is exactly what a financial architecture is designed to prevent. Mary, when you have seen teams evaluate product performance, what do you often miss when they believe that they already understand profitability?
Well, thank it always makes me laugh. They look at the first thing people look at is sales, right? And they say sales growth is great. And the second number they look at, they say, well, wait a second, but my margin is on plan. It's exactly what I thought it was going to be. And then you start peeling the onion. And nobody likes to look below that line at your operating costs, at what it truly costs to maintain that inventory, what it truly costs to sell that inventory, because it's not part of margin. And all of a sudden now, and then there's the discussions. I won't say fights, I'm going to say discussions between the merchandisers and the operators, right? Because the merchandisers are saying, my margin's good, I did my job, the operators need to sell it and they need to keep our costs down. Well, what they're forgetting is it's a team. It's a team effort. And that discussion, again, needs to happen prior to the end of the month when you're looking at your financial statements. We can't say that enough. I mean, what it costs below the margin line is critical. The operators, the merchandisers need to be in sync. They need to look at each individual cost and say, is this still worthwhile to sell? And sometimes there are hard decisions to make. And the merchandisers, again, and the operators are gonna discuss. We'll say, well, we won't say fight. We'll say discuss what the right course of action should be. But again, all should happen prior to the end of the month. Should happen before. It's all part of the planning.
Exactly. And that is where the simplified margin view can become really dangerous. It gives the team
Mm-hmm.
confidence, but not always the control that they need, right? And if it's not
Exactly.
embedded into your culture across all of your departments, then we often are blindsided. And this is often
Yes.
underlooked. Oh, sorry, I would say overlooked in this case, right? And if our team were build this live with your team, we would start with a simple structure. First, we would select one product category. Then we would define the intended role of that category. Is it a margin driver, or volume driver, or a traffic driver, or retention tool? A brand credibility builder, maybe perhaps, or a basket builder. And if you remember, we've a couple of months ago, we've actually talked about how to create a different segmentation for all of your SKUs or all of your assortment, because each SKU should have its own role. And that matters because not every product needs to do the same job. A margin driver and a traffic driver should not be judged by identical expectations, but they both need to have economical guardrails. When we would build the model around the job that the product is supposed to do, for a margin driver, we may need a higher contribution margin, lower return vitality, and a disciplined markdown exposure. For traffic driver, for example, on a flip side, we may accept lower contribution margin if it improves the acquisition efficiency, if it improves the repeat purchases, if it improves the basket size, or full price conversion everywhere. For wholesale volume product, in the flip side, we may accept a low gross margin percentage if the order improves inventory turn, cash conversion, and the production leverage. This is how a mature brands think. They do not ask, is every SKU equal profitability? Or is it profitable? They ask, is every SKU doing the financial intentional job? I thinking about it really, one I'd love you to think of one category your team clearly state the economic role of that category right now if you would go and ask your merchandising team? And if the answer is yes, does your financial model actually measures whether that category is performing against that role? Once the first model is built, the next move is where the conversion becomes more sophisticated, because the same product can create very different profit outcomes depending on the sales channel and depending on where it grows. One of the biggest execution mistakes that our team sees is really treating channel strategies like sales strategies. Channels are not just sales outlets. And I see Mary smiling because we've just recently finished a project exactly facing that challenge. And then channels are really a cost structure. Your direct to consumer is the cost structure, right? Your wholesale is your cost structure. Your marketplace is your cost structure, or retail partnerships could potentially be your distribution. And each one of them changes how profit behaves. This is why the question, which channel should we grow in, is often become very incomplete. And surprisingly, this is often what we get asked by some of our clients, especially when they're just coming in. The better question that we help them pivot towards is which product should live in which channel, under which margin and cash assumption. Let's get started and kind of talk about channel by channel so that we can see where some of those things are and how we are potentially need to change them or consider. Direct to consumer channel often looks attractive because the gross margin percentage is higher. You own the customer relationships and customer acquisition, customer data, and that's the gold, and that's a key for any business. You control the presentation, you collect more data, and you tell the brand story more directly. And all of that is extremely valuable. But direct to consumer also carries cost and vitality. Customer acquisition cost, returns, fulfillment, reverse logistics, customer service, technology, payment processing, promotional pressure, inventory fermentation, creative and marketing overhead, and that's just the beginning. So when the direct to consumer can be absolutely profitable, but it cannot be evaluated through the gross margin alone. A product with a beautiful gross margin can become weak once you include the costs of inquiring the customer and fulfillment in fulfilling the orders or processing the returns and discounting to more access inventory. And you also tying up cash to with all that inventory that you have to have in order to support healthy direct to consumer business. On the flip side, when we look at the wholesale usually looks less attractive because the gross margin percentage is lower. But the wholesale can often offer a volume, predictability, lower fulfillment complexity, lower consumer and customer acquisition costs, and better inventory velocity. But the question is not whether the wholesale has the lower margin percentage. Of course, it often does. The question is where the wholesale creates the healthier contribution margin profile to for certain products once you factor a cost to serve and a cash timing and operational burden. This is one of the places where brands often surprise themselves. A channel they assumed was less profitable may actually be more stabilized for the business. And the channel they assumed that was strongest may have been consumed more margin than you ever realized. So thinking about, and there's really no one way or the other. Often with all of our clients, we end up landing on the hybrid models where we strategically dissect the assortment and analyze each SKU based on their role and figuring out which channels is the right channels to sell those particular SKUs or those particular categories. Mary, there were one of the things I really love to get your perspective. I mean, again, and you come from a retail space that had all kinds of categories. I mean, we're talking about massive differentiators, starting from books all the way to general merchandise, as well as the apparel and the cosmetics. I mean, you really carried it all. So when the leadership really compared your direct to consumer versus a channel, a marketplace sales, or potentially even doing some wholesale, where should they look at beyond margin percentage?
Everything you're saying is music to an accountant's ears, by the way, because what what is as frustrating for us is when they don't look at when people don't look at all the different aspects, and to hear a merchandiser as you preach it, I'm reaching out to everybody out there, how important that is. There is no one channel that's the same. Every channel has different characteristics, and they're going to have different characteristics within your business. So it's so critically important that you make good decisions based on, by SKU, which merchandise you should sell within which channel. Which ones are, even though you have a low margin on wholesale, but maybe you have a lot of inventory and you need to get rid of it. So guess what? It's better to have the lower margin item in wholesale and sell it and lower your costs, and be able to buy more merchandise, free up your cash flow. Those are all things you need to look at individually. Looking at marketplaces, looking at the fees that you're getting charged for, to sell your stuff, looking at how much it's costing both at the marketplace and outside the marketplace to carry your merchandise. What does it cost operationally to store it? How long are your inventory turns by SKU? Oh my goodness, there's so much low hanging fruit if you start peeling the onion. And this is the best way to do it, is to really start one product at a time.
And you're absolutely right. And this is where the really on the executive level, I'd love for you guys to start thinking about the shift and how you can embed that into the culture of your business, of your brand. You do not scale channels, you scale profitable channels, SKU contributions. Very,
Yes.
very different. That
Yes.
means one SKU may be excellent in wholesale, but it might be risky to consumer and attractive in marketplace. Another SKU may be strong in direct to consumer because it has the low returns, high repeat purchase, basket behavior, but weak wholesale because the price architecture does not support the margin. Another may belong in a marketplace only if it has operational simplicity, stable demand, or low customer education requirements. This is where the financial architecture becomes a strategic asset. It helps leaders stop debating the channel emotionally. It start evaluating how specific products behaviors inside specific economic environment. Here's the question that can be uncomfortable but very useful, and I'd love to leave that with you guys for you to think about. If you removed your least profitable channel tomorrow, would total company profit increase or decrease? I really love you for you to think about it. I'd love to see your comments later on below when you guys are gonna kind of really dissect what's really happening under your hood in your business. And most teams often cannot answer that comfortably because the way they look at the revenue by channel, not contribution margin by channel. Now, even when you understand the model and the channel behavior, there's still one more problem. The future never follows the base plan exactly. That is why the strong brands do not build one version of future, they build ranges. This is where the financial architecture becomes real, right? Most companies plan have one version of that future. How many times have you heard a merchandising team pitching you guys a new category and they're talking about the how it will happen in an ideal world? And they sell the dream only to find out that their ideal case scenario, unfortunately, is not necessarily the case once we actually hit the market. Because we did not predict for the worst, best, or base case scenario, or we just placed everything in the base case scenario, we often find out later that this move was not the right move for the company. But yet we already exhausted the resources, the inventory. Now we're sitting on, we exhausted the financial, we tied up cash, and so forth. The sales plan, the margin plan, the inventory plan, the product plan, the channel plan, all of those things needs to be placed based on a multi-version planning scenario. But the fashion does not operate in one vision of this future because fashion constantly changes. Think about it. We have a demand shifts, freight changes, return moves, discounts deepers, right? Launches potentially could get delayed. Suppliers miss timelines sometimes. Customers' behavior really create different expectations. And the product is overperforms sometimes, or potentially it underperforms, and the cash timing changes. So when the leadership only has one plan and basing the decision on one plan, the business become very fragile. The momentum reality really diverts from the plan to the team becomes reactive, where the scenario planning fixes that by asking what happens if the assumption changes. How often do you ask that to your merchandising team? At the minimum, we want the brands to think at least three scenarios: best case, base case, and worst case. Best case is not a fantasy, it is an upside scenario where the realistic behavioral assumptions. Very important. I'm going to repeat this. We feel realistic, favorable assumptions. We often have clients who come in with a best case scenario and it's unrealistic. So you have to also put the lens, is this realistic? Maybe returns are lower than expected, right? Where your COGS remains stable and sell through is strong, discounting is limited, and inventory returns are cleanly. Well, it cannot completely eliminate returns. I mean, we've seen models where they do best case scenario as a zero return percent. It's impossible. Does not exist in the direct to consumer business, right? Base case scenario is really a pure expected reality. And this is a lot of times what we get sold on when we get introduced a new category or product. It reflects what the most likely to happen based on a current performance, current cost, current customer behavior, and current channel assumptions. Where the worst case is really does not mean to be pessimistic. It is a risk management. What happens is a freight increases. What happens if the return spikes? What happens if the discount deepers? What happens if the product misses forecast? What happens if the wholesale order shifts, right? What happens if the supplier delay forces a more expensive logistics decision? The purpose of scenario planning is not to predict it perfectly. The purpose is to make sure that the business can survive and respond intelligently when the assumptions move. The most important time to stress this profit is before major decisions are locked. Before you buy, before your supplier commitments are in place, before your pricing are finalized, before your channel plan approved, every single layer for every single team, you need to embed the culture and mentality of doing the scenario planning. That's the part of model architecture, of the financial model architecture. Because one of those decisions are locked, your flexibility is really much more narrow. And when the flexibility is narrow, the business often pays the really certainty through the margin loss, through the cash pressure or the operational strain. A good stress test asks questions like, if my returns increases by 5 points, is this something that the product can really still be scalable? And if we, for example, need to discount by 12%, does the contribution margin remain acceptable? And or if the freight increases by 10%, which SKU becomes more vulnerable, right? Or if the direct to consumer, um, SaaS raises, and then does the wholesale become more attractive in this category for or that particular product? If the sale through misses forecast, how much cash gets trapped in inventory? If the supplier require a higher MOQ, does the margin improvement justify the inventory risk? Those are not a financial questions, which surprisingly we often do end up trying to solve as we already committed, right? Those are really needs to be the leadership questions within each department before that main decision is made. Mary, when you look at the scenario planning, which assumptions do you think become more dangerous when teams do not stress test them early enough?
For me, it was always the ones that everybody thought they were fixed. These were the ones that aren't going to change. And they would be, hell bent on, my return rate has been X% for X amount of semesters or whatever, and then something happens. So instead of looking at a range, instead of looking at, the best base and worst case scenario and planning accordingly so that and reacting quick enough, is just, I want to say poor management. The one thing that you said that I want to stress also is not making decisions in a silo. You need to work with your finance team. Often we became the person who asked the question, and people said, well, why the heck did you ask me that question now? I already bought, I already spent $10,000 on this, and now you're asking me, XYZ. It's like, well, guess what? You should have asked me that question before you bought it, right? Of course, you can't say that to your leadership. You want to say that, but it's all about good planning. It's all about planning for the unexpected and having a good strategy. So fixed
Exactly.
costs.
Fixed cost. And I'm glad you brought this up because scenario planning is not about being negative. It's about
No,
knowing where the business is financially sensitive before the sensitivity becomes expensive. And to your point, the fixed costs are the ones we often underlooked because we
exactly.
are already thought that we predicted that across and can apply across all categories and products, but that's not the case.
Exactly. And the merchandisers are the ones who could educate the finance team. What are those fixed? What are the ones and and help partner with us so that we could help plan, the best base and worst case scenarios.
And I would love to leave everyone who's listening or watching this as a replay. When was the last time your team stress test margin before proving the buy, right? Or price change or channel expansion? And when you did it, like, did it change the decision or simply confirm the decision people already wanted to make? Because the second question matters because even more for this model is because it's only where it's valuable if it changes the behavior. Which brings us to the final piece that I would love to share today. It's connecting the model to the actual decision. This is where many teams disconnect. We often sometimes ask those questions, come up with the answers, while we already decided that the decision is going to stay the same. We're just trying to retrofit our answer to strengthen the position of our decision that we already made versus utilizing the actual analysis to potentially gauge your decision in the first place. They build models, as teams, they review dashboards, they discuss performance, but the model does not actually change how the company buys or just pricing or sourcing or location or promotions or scales. When that happens, financial modeling becomes just a reporting exercise instead of managing systems. And it ties up everybody's time and yet no results. So, really, let us talk about why this should connect to the decision making. And the reason why I wanted to leave this for the end and stress this the most, because honestly, that is the hardest thing for all of our clients to overcome. First, we want to look at pricing, right? Most brands believe that the pricing are for margin, but many are actually pricing for future discounting. That really decision, real in destination, really needs to matter, right? You need to start thinking about that in a different terms. If your customers rarely buys at full price, then your true, really realized price is not your ticket price. Your true realized price is the price after promotion behavior, markdowns, channel expansions, and customer training, right? A financial architectural lens would ask, what price do we need to support the intended contribution margin under the realistic sell through and discount assumptions? Not what price looks right for the market, not what price gives us the healthier IRU on paper, which we exactly what often is asked when we are deciding what we're going to price this product, but what price supports the economic job this product is supposed to do. So this is the main questions we want to ask when we look at pricing. Second, I want us to look at inventory. Inventory is where financial architecture becomes very visible because inventory is where the cash gets trapped. A product can have attractive margin, but if the buy is too deep and the size curve is wrong, the channel plan is weak, or sell through depends on discounting, the margin may never become your cash. So the inventory question cannot simply be how much demand do we expect. We also have to think about how much risk can this SKU absorb before it damages the profit or cash flow, right? That means higher performing brands look at inventory through margin behavior, vitality, and replenishment flexibility, channel fit, and cash conversion, not just forecasted demand. Third, I want us to look at sourcing and supply chain. Many of our clients teams optimize for unit cost, create a financial risk somewhere else. Lower unit cost can be attractive, but it comes with higher MOQ, and if it longer lead time and the lower flexibility, the higher inventory exposures, or weaker ability to chase demand, the business may have a trade visibility cost savings for the hidden risk. A financial architecture list does not ask only, can we get this cheaper? We have to also ask, what does it really, this sourcing decision, do to the margin and inventory risk and the cash timing and operational flexibility? Sometimes the cheaper suppliers are not the more profitable suppliers. You hear me say it all the time. Sometimes speed, reliability, flexibility, or lower inventory risk creates more enterprise value than points on the cost reduction. Mary, from your perspective, how should leaders think about sourcing and supply chain decisions when they're the cheapest units cost may not create the best financial outcome?
They need to look at the whole picture. They need to look to see how quickly do I need this product. Maybe it's not going to come in as fast because I'm paying such a cheaper cost, and then I'm going to miss my opportunity to sell. Maybe it's gonna be better to pay the extra so that I could get it in and I could make more sales. They need to look how how good is that supplier? If they're going to offer it to me that cheap, how reliable are they? Am I going to what is their rating? Look at what their reviews are. you need to do a little bit more research, because it's not always about the cheapest. It's you want to make sure that it's the product is good. You don't want to put a poor product, a poor, then this is coming from a financial person who's saying, I'm not going to look at, how good the teas are, or how good how good the parka is. But I'm going to look at the markdowns, because if you put out poor product, all of a sudden now you're not looking at the whole picture, and your markdowns might be higher. Your returns might be higher. So you need to look at the whole picture. Don't just look at the lowest cost margin item.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'll say, if you are really, now that we're coming towards the end and top of our hour, if you are listening to this and thinking, this makes sense, but where do I really start, right? I would not start by trying to rebuild everything at once. The right starting point is really focused 90-day visibility and decision redesign sprint. So, first 30 days, select the pilot and build the model. Right? In the first 30 days, choose one category, one product family that matters financially. Not the easiest category, not the cleanest category, not one where better visibility would actually change. Build a unit economic model around it, just around that one thing. Define revenue assumption, true COGS, channel specific costs, returns, fulfillment, markdowns, operational cost, contribution margin. Then define the role of that category inside the assortment. Next 30 days after that, let's look at the channel overlays. How does this category behaves in direct to consumer? How does it behave in wholesale, marketplace, retail partners? Right? Where is the margin stronger? Where the cash is faster? Where is the operational burden higher? Where does the risk shows up? Then build the best base and worst case scenario. Do not overcomplicate the first version. The point is not perfection. The point is really visibility that is good enough to improve the decision. In the final 30 days, connect the model to the actual decision gates. Where should this model be viewed? Before the line adoption, before the buy approval, or before the pricing and final or being finalized, or should be before supplier commitments, before promotional planning, or before channel allocation. This is where the work becomes operational. You are not just building a spreadsheet, you are redesigning the decision process so that the business can see financial consequences earlier. And once that pilot works, you can expand the architecture across additional categories, channels, and teams. So I challenge all of you guys to get with us on this 90-day plan. Send us a comment below. We're happy to send you the actual roadmap. We'd love to schedule a call with you and chat about your business and see how we could be able to brainstorm with you the right solutions. But I do challenge all of you who are growing your businesses in today's environment is to make sure that you look at your company culture and to ensure that the architectural financial modeling is part of it at every layer in every department. That is really critical and very mission driven, really important. So I'd love to hear from you as you guys are gaining this information. Whomever is listening to this recordings, please do share your thoughts, and if any of your questions, leave the comments below. We will gladly answer them. Now, in the upcoming events, we are skipping for the first time in 2.5 years. We're skipping 1 month of July. I am moving across the country, so yes, I'm going to skip the live events in July, but we're going to resume back in August. We're going to actually pivot towards design and product development, since we are going to be heavily starting up. If a majority of you guys are going to be start working on your spring summer collections of 2027, and we're going to be talking about fixing the fitting, how to look at the quality, and how do we really reduce the product development waste. And our roundtable will be on August 4th. And our path to profit will follow that from the execution perspective of how to design and do a product development for excellence, where we're going to cover great ways of how to optimize those processes on your end, how to make it more less wasteful, and how to create product and assortments that are much more stronger and optimized for your consumer. We always love your support. Thank you very much for liking us, sharing our content, giving us feedback, giving us thumbs up. It always helps for us to continuously deliver value and help us help you grow your business. Thank you very much, and we'll see you guys back in